I'm going to talk about Zivotofsky versus Kerry. And that's a case that involves a conflict between the president and the Congress in the very controversial and difficult setting of Middle East domestic and international politics. The Foreign Relations Authorization Act directs the Secretary of State on request to record the birth country of an American citizen born in Jerusalem as Israel on that person's U.S. passport. President Bush signed that law but said that this requirement's not consistent with the president's constitutional authority to conduct foreign affairs, and more specifically with the president's recognition power if it in fact requires this denomination. The State Department has, since the passage of this statute in 2002, refused to enforce the law on the ground that it's incompatible with the government's established neutrality on the status of Jerusalem as part of either Palestine or Israel. Instead, it lists the birthplace of U.S. citizens born in Jerusalem as just Jerusalem. Now, the Zivotofskys were U.S. parents living in Jerusalem when their baby was born, and this case arises from the State Department's denial of their request that his passport indicate that he was born in Israel. Again, their child was born in 2002, so that just demonstrates that this statute's been controversial since the beginning, and in fact, this is only one in a sort of procession of statutory provisions that create conflict between the executive branch and Congress pushing the U.S. policy towards the recognition of Israeli sovereignty over Jerusalem. So the Supreme Court's seen this case before. A couple of years ago, the D.C. Circuit had held that it was the conflict about whether the statute had to be observed or whether the State Department could rightly resist was a political question. That issue went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, nope, it's not a political question. And so now they're going to reap what they've sowed, which is they're going to have to decide the question about whether the president indeed has exclusive recognition authority or whether what Congress has done is within its control over passports and over the regulation of immigration, and isn't really a significant infringement on recognition, doesn't amount to an official act of recognition. And so I think the court is going to find itself in a very difficult question, having to resolve this power question between the executive branch and Congress. The D.C. Circuit below held that the president's authority was exclusive and plenary, and in fact that this requirement that Congress imposed would infringe on recognition power. In part, I think the statute itself creates the problem here. The statute itself says that it is the policy of the United States that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And so this is one of the things that creates the significant infringement upon the president's recognition authority, rather than opening up somebody's passport and seeing the word Israel instead of the word Jerusalem. But it doesn't change the sort of practical reality of the situation from the point of view of the State Department, which I think is that if the Supreme Court were to reverse and say that the statute has to be enforced, there would be a perception, at least the State Department believes there would in the Middle East, that the United States had retreated from its long-established policy about neutrality on the status of Jerusalem. And so there's sort of a practical problem of perception presented to the Supreme Court in this case, as well as it's an extremely difficult and important case that creates both theoretical, I think, and practical difficulties for the court.